Good morning, everyone. It's glad to have you here for our daily encouragement. Just as an aside, this is my birthday today, so I'm very happy to have reached 53 years in this life, and so I'm very blessed to be in this position. Right now, we are in 1 Peter chapter 2, and the last verse we had was the silence or ignorance of being foolish, but it says, as servants of God, live as free people, yet do not use your freedom as a pretext for evil. I think this is probably one of the most important verses for Americans to talk about because we value our freedom. Many of our commercials, I know years ago there was like a car commercial that would have the words no boundaries on it. And those are some of the ways that we try to exercise our freedom, is to say that we have no rules. Of course, we know as adults and we know as regular citizens, we have rules. We have different layers of rules. We have federal rules, we have state rules and local rules. And so many of us, when our patchwork, decide to live in a place where we like the rules a little bit more than other places where we don't like the rules. At least that's what we live in theory. Or we pine away in our present state that we live in, and we say, oh, if we could be like Wyoming or Montana or some other state that has more freedoms in some ways than the restrictions that we have. Remember, rules are also there for justice sake, too. So sometimes a rule is put in place in order to correct tendencies within us that are evil. But the greatest thing that can prevent us from doing evil is a change of heart. And the New Testament provides some very interesting insights into that change of heart. It says that when we acknowledge that we are in bondage to sin and cannot free ourselves, that we are restricted from doing good. And so the greatest example of freedom is not to show how unbounded we are to do evil, but to show how unbounded we are to do good. And that is one of the contradictions of the New Testament in its rhetoric. It says, in order for you to be free, you need to be a servant or a slave to God. In order for you to be free, you have to be a servant or a slave to the things that are just. And that's something that I think is a corrective to our land of the free and the home of the brave. What are you free from? You're free from sin. What are you free for? You're free to be brave and bold. In fact, that's the context that Martin Luther makes his most controversial, if not interesting, statement. And he says, if someone says that what you're doing is a sin, well, sin boldly. And what he means by that is sometimes the king would tell people not to listen to the word of God, or if you have the example of Hans Nielsen Hauge from Norway, who was arrested. Why? Because he was preaching the word of God without a license. And so his descendants, his followers that came to America, lived in this country where we do not need a license to preach. And so it is in that context we read once again Paul, who says, as servants or slaves of God, live as free people. Yet do not use your freedom as a pretext for evil or as a foundation for evil. Now, Peter writes this. Paul really reflects upon it in Romans 6, where he begins this chapter by simply saying, are we to continue in freedom, continue in sin that grace may abound? And he says, by no means. Grace is to help us free ourselves from sin, not be, as Peter says, a pretext for sin. So, my friends, I encourage you on this day, as I encourage myself, who have been born into this world with its restrictions, who have been born in the waters of baptism into the freedom of the next life to be good. Let us strive to use our freedom not as a pretext for evil, but as a means by doing good for others. God bless you today. We trust that these continue to be words of encouragement. Take care. We'll see you next time.